and now any sort of technical collaborating they do with private aerospace companies and or other technology companies is really about monitoring, the surface and the climate and the weather. So anyways, they've got this page. They set it up. They set the table real nice. Facts. Okay. So don't even question anything below this, right? Like below this, it's all, you can't even question it. Okay. So climate change. How do we know? All right. I'm going to turn it over to you, man. Just talk about this chart a little bit.
Okay. So
what are they trying to say here?
First of all, this graph is based on the comparison of atmospheric samples contained on ice cores and more recent direct measurements. And it supposedly provides evidence that atmospheric CO2 has increased since the Industrial Revolution. Okay, but what if this, parabolic ascent that they're claiming from the carbon dioxide level parts per million in 1950, which it says was 315 parts per million, it's now supposedly at 415 parts per million. So this sort of chartist depiction more or less is saying that, according to this trajectory, we're going to get to a billion parts, 1,000 parts per million,
right?
Really soon. And that's just, who cares if it's plant food? Who cares that it's what trees breathe? We're in a greenhouse here.
Look,
and we're going to get baked.
Look, to believe that they accurately measured here,
right,
in the current era, which we can talk about, what and how they measure,
right,
this, they would also have to be able to accurately measure all of this. And this is, am I correct, 800,000 years that they're measuring? So how do they do that? Okay, so it's the comparison of atmospheric samples contained in ice cores, which where are they getting those? Isn't that mostly Antarctica, right?
Oh yeah, and this goes to the sort of seance magic around
carbon dating.
Yeah, it's quite the shamanic process of interpretation if you really look into the methodology that establishes it as hard and fast evidence. But honestly, yeah, the whole thing of this ice, it must be like the rings on a tree where we can determine its age.
But look, they've set up this military restriction of, quote, Antarctica, and that's where they have their apocalyptic seed bank. That's where they don't have public commercial flights flying over. That's where they don't allow citizens to traverse and explore
under serious penalty of law
or death.
Like they can shoot you.
And that's also where they seem to have a penchant for drilling a lot of ice. And this is where they get their magical evidence of past 800,000 plus years of carbon atmospheric samples. So in other words, you have to believe that they can measure this accurately here and also procure it here. Now, we could also talk about how deep we've publicly drilled.
Oh yeah,
it's like 8 miles, right?
Yeah, that's the deepest from the surface that we've gone.
How do they know that? Let's just say 8 miles of ice in Antarctica is equivalent to 800,000 years of time. How do they know that? How do they know that?
Yeah, there's no way that they can actually know that. And even if you look at this chart, like they're basically putting this graph together from pure inferential guesswork, and that even if you look at the parabolic ascent, like even when it comes to charting, like usually that kind of parabolic ascent gets rejected almost immediately.
In any sort of analyst community, that would be like,
No.
that's very unlikely to happen. Like,
It's like basically an error. I mean, that errors happen like that in the market all the time, where a price spikes up super fast,
and that's when the plunge protection team comes in and basically shuts the markets down.
Right. So
that's another subject.
That's another subject altogether. But it leads into the broader topic of chartism and the whole Cartesian method of analyzing data.
All right, we're obsessing over this chart like they want to. So, all right, so the Earth's let's zoom in for the readers here. The Earth's climate has changed throughout history. Oh, thanks, Captain Obvious.
Goodness.
Just in the last
Brilliant.
650,000 years, there have been 7 cycles of glacial advance and retreat, with the abrupt end of the last ice age about 7,000 years ago, making the beginning of the modern climate era and of human civilization. Okay, this right here, I mean, this is like basically a creation myth.
Yeah, this is a grand narrative.
Right?
Yeah.
And if you're supposed to believe what they say you should do with respect to your carbon footprint, that means you also have to believe that the end of the last ice age was about 7,000 years ago, marking the beginning of the modern climate era and of human civilization. So they're basically saying human civilization started 7,000 years ago. I mean, that's as crazy, right, as the quote, Christians that believe the earth was created 6,000 years ago. If you want to compare, how is this any less radical of an opinion?
Right.
Right?
I mean, there's no real forensic methodology. It's all inductive inferential hermeneutics. There's no actual heuristic method to verify these years. They're like rounded out.
But also, Xavier, this contradicts many archaeological
of course it does. Absolutely
discoveries.
it does.
Right
it's
here
total
on
bollocks.
The facts page, how do we know about climate change? I mean, it's just ridiculous. Okay, let's move on from this ridiculous.
I mean, global. I mean, it just goes to show that this is their new boondoggle, basically.
Yeah.
Where of course they're not going anywhere in space, because space is a privation of the ether, and we can't go anywhere. So.
Right. So there was another interesting contradictory NASA page, since we're on the NASA subject.
Right.
And it just, to me, I wanted to highlight it because it refutes the other climate change, global warming myth that the increase in human population, human industrial activity, etc., is the reason for ecosystem collapse. What else? Just the whole apocalypticism around the climate change. Our existence and our growth as a species is a cancer to the earth, etc. And that's NASA's own. If they do have a service, I'm cool with weather balloons. We can monitor what's going on as for benevolent purposes. I mean, this is a interesting thing to know. That human activity in China and India dominates the greening of Earth. So these are the two the most populous countries. They have, that's despite China's best efforts, right? Billions of people, the dirtiest factories, right? In both of these places. Yeah, there's pollution. Yeah, there's ecosystem problems as a result of concentrations of populations and lack of technology and wealth and a whole host of socio-demographic issues,
inability to properly utilize waste,
right?
Lots of waste pile up.
The earth is doing fine. It's, if anything, that it's hard to tame. Just talk to those people,
right?
And they got some of the wildest wildlife that'll kill you in both of those places. So
that's true. It's very, very hostile environment in between there with the Himalayas. But if you look at the most of India is extremely lush.